Hi. Welcome everyone. Hi. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Quintanilla. I'm the Vice President of the Pan Indigenous Student Organization. And it is a great pleasure to have everyone here today at the 2025 Indigenous Peoples Lecture. This event is meant to be a continued conversation at Hope College as we seek to enhance awareness and the voices of the indigenous communities from around the world. Today, we'll hear a keynote from our speaker, from the Executive Director of World Renew, Carol Bremer-Bennett, who will be speaking on the power that we carry, belonging as a sacred responsibility. Before we begin though, I would like to acknowledge the land that we stand on and the labor that has shaped it. Together, we acknowledge that as we gather as Hope College on the traditional land of the Peoria, Warewarami, and Odawa, and Ojibwa, the peoples past and present, we honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. As a community, we recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from the past wrongdoings. We acknowledge this long history of injustice and commit to educating ourselves and our community as we seek to honor the legacy and culture of the indigenous peoples. We recognize, acknowledge, and affirm the historic and contemporary solidarities and intersections between Black and indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the extraction of brilliance, energy, and life for labor forced upon of African descent for more than 400 years. As an organization, we are dedicated to advancing solutions that promote equality, dismantle oppressive systems, and uplift the voices and experiences of marginalized communities. We understand that acknowledging the labor of enslaved people is an essential step in addressing the historical and present-day injustices that continue to shape our society. We carry our ancestors with us, and we continually call to be better. We commit to dismantling racism in spaces of our work. We invite you to work beside us to create change. As a student and part of the Pan Indigenous Student Organization, we are so grateful to the Culture and Inclusive Excellence Division and the Center for Diversity and Inclusion for the support in sponsoring this program. Again, thank you for coming to this lecture. I hope you enjoy it, but more importantly, I hope you learned something new that will inspire you. Now, everyone, please welcome Natalie Breck, who will be giving us an artistic interpretation of the poem, America, I Sing Back.
Alison Adele Hedgecock's poem, America, I Sing You Back, is an extension and response to Walt Whitman's I Hear America Singing poem about the identity of America, and the later Langston Hughes poem, I Too, which asserts Black people's fundamental American identity. His poem protests American racism and demands equal rights and dignity. Hedgecock wanted to represent the voice of a woman and an indigenous person, as everyone sees our country from different perspectives. The poem follows the story of a mother singing to her child, waiting for her child to mature. As the child gets older, it acts out, but the mother knows eventually the child will accept reason. Hedgecock uses her poem to express the concern for what she has seen in the United States and her alarm for the greediness of politicians to take away the land's natural resources. She compares the government to a child and the indigenous people as worried parents watching them without having any control over them. America, I sing back. America, I sing back. Sing back what you sung in. Sing back the moment you cherished breath. Sing you home to yourself and back to reason. But before America began to sing, I sung her to sleep, held her cradle board, wept her into day. My song gave her creation, prepared her for delivery, held her severed cord beautifully beaded. My song helped her stand, held her hand her first steps, nourished her very being, fed her, placed her three sisters strong. My song comforted her as she battled my reason, broke my long held footing sure as any child might do. Lo, as she pushed herself away, forced me to ruin myself. As I cried this country, my song grew roses in each tear's fall. My blood-veined rivers painted pipestone portals, circled canyons, while she made herself neat and fine. Oh, but here I am, here. I remain high on each and every peak, carefully rumbling her great underbelly, prepared to pour forth singing, and sing again I will, as I have always done. never silenced unless in the company of strangers singing. The stoic face, polite response, polite while dancing deep inside, polite. Mother of her world, singing of myself, when my song sings aloud again, when I call her back to cradle, call her to peer into waters, to behold herself in dark and light, day and night, call her to sing along, call her to mature, to envision. Then she will make herself over, my song will make it so. When she grows far past her self-considered purpose, I will sing her back I will sing, oh I will do. America, sing back what you sang. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Olivia Lugo, and I'm the treasurer of the Pan-Indigenous Student Organization. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce you to our speaker, Carol Bremer-Bennett, speaking today for the 2025 Indigenous Peoples Lecture. So, Carol Bremer-Bennett is World Renewed U.S. Executive Director. She is born to the Waters Flow Together clan and born for the Bitter clan of Navajo Nation. Bremer-Bennett is an educator by training with a BA from Calvin College and an MA from Western New Mexico University. Her extensive experience in Christian ministry spans more than 25 years of organizational leadership development, and administration. She is humbled to be a beloved and adopted daughter of God. Adoptions have played an ongoing role in her story. 5 of her 6 children are adopted. She and her husband Theo Bremer-Bennett have 3 children of Navajo descent and 3 of Ethiopian descent. Their family motto is, "The African bus is never full." Today's lecture will explore the deep human need for belonging and the sacred responsibility we each carry in nurturing it. Drawing from indigenous wisdom, Christian faith, and lived local experience, Carol reflects on how our interdependence is rooted in creation itself, and how flourishing emerges when we live to complement and strengthen one another. This is the Navajo concept of hozho, where there is balance, harmony, and beauty. Now, please help me give a warm welcome to Carol Bremer-Bennett.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And yes, the African bus is never full, and apparently neither is the recital hall here at the college. Just so honored that you would come on a Thursday afternoon to come and consider the power that we carry and the responsibility that we have to one another in sacred belonging. And so wow, I'm really touched that you could be here. She'e Carol Bremer-Bennett Yanashe, Tohatlini Nishle, Totachini Basas Chi. My name is Carol Bremer-Bennett, as said before, and my clans are the Water Flows Together people and the Bitter Water people of the Dene, the Navajo people of the great and beautiful Southwest. And I'm thrilled to be here with you. I do serve as the Executive Director of World Renew, and that is a relief and development organization that works to restore hope, reconcile lives, and renew creation around the world. And we work in about 25 countries around the world. And if you'd like to hear more about World Renew, one of my staff is out there and can answer questions about that work. I have a privilege of traveling the world and gathering stories that inspire as they also break your heart. And I'm honored to be able to share some of those stories. The work of World Renew reaches into some of the most remote areas of the world, to some of the most vulnerable and forgotten people of the world. And many of those people have indigenous roots and have been marginalized by their countries and governments. And so it's an honor as an indigenous person to lead an organization that takes that mission seriously and has a tremendous impact in the world. Of all my titles, though, however, I need to make sure that you caught that last one, that I am standing before you as a beloved daughter of God, our great Creator. And that really is the title that means the most to me and has formed and shaped my life and my worldview. So as we gather today to reflect on the power that we carry and how we can use that power to create sacred belongings for ourselves and for others, I wanted to reflect on this topic. I've been reflecting on it for a while. And a couple of months ago, I got to meet with one of the indigenous elders of this area, which is not the land that I'm originally from, but he started to reflect about the banks of the Grand River. And he spoke about the power that his ancestors felt there, this heavy space, he called it. And I asked him about, what does he mean by heavy? He said, a heavy space is a space where you feel God's presence more intensely and you're more connected. Somehow you're more connected to God and you're more connected to yourself, which then makes you want to be more connected to others. And I said, I've been drawn to those holy spaces. Those sacred spaces I've been taught are called thin spaces. And I've traveled and I've found thin spaces where the spirit feels especially close, where the land itself seems to hum with holiness. As a Christian, I believe that all of earth is sacred. Every square inch, as I was taught at Calvin, and you might be taught here at Hope, as Abraham Kuyper declared, every square inch belongs to God. And when I talk about God, I often think of the Creator because I'm thinking of the intention that God put into the world. And so that is something that I think of. And yet, the Navajo, in our tradition, we have 4 sacred mountains. And I have felt the strength of God in these 4 sacred mountains. The mountains are much too far away from each other to capture in one picture, but this is a picture of the eastern sacred mountain of the Navajo in New Mexico, near Grants, New Mexico, and it's called Mount Taylor. Many of you were not born, many of you here today were not born when the plane struck the Twin Towers on 9/11. I remember, and those who were alive at that time remember exactly where you were when that moment occurred. I was teaching in a small Christian school called Rehoboth, New Mexico, and we have some people from Rehoboth who were either raised there or taught there or who have been friends of Rehoboth and volunteered there in the audience today. So I honor that place. It's where I'm living this year, actually. But I was in Rehoboth, New Mexico, and I was teaching middle school students on 9/11. It was a Tuesday. And even though we were very far from New York City and very far from Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania and where the targets of that attack were, everyone felt somehow unsafe that day and in the days that followed. The world seemed to have shifted beneath our feet. 9/11 was a Tuesday. On Thursday, we were scheduled to take our students backpacking on Mount Taylor, up this sacred mountain. Some parents hesitated and said they did not want their child to go on this trip with us because it wasn't safe. And you thought, who's going to hurt Mount Taylor? There's nothing there, right? But we went. And as we sang and prayed around the campfire that night, we made a commitment to one another that we would all make it to the summit of Mount Taylor the next day. And sure enough, the next day, every single 7th and 8th grader reached the summit. It was a bit of a motley crew. We had to really help some that straggled, but we all got to the top, and we stood atop that mountain. And we looked to the east, and then we looked to the south, and we looked to the west, and we looked to the north, and we prayed, and we claimed it all for God. It felt like it was truly a sacred mountain, holy ground. I came down from that mountain changed. Maybe sort of small, like Moses descending from Mount Sinai. Like I had been somehow in the presence of the divine. I felt like I had received a message with purpose. And I struggled with that for a bit because I thought, I'm a Christian. Am I falling into traditional beliefs that, this mountain is somehow sacred and holy? what happened to every place being, and every square inch being sacred and holy. And so I struggled with that feeling. And it took me a long time, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit of where I've landed about why a place can be sacred and be holy. Why was that space so heavy or so thin for me? In the Navajo traditional belief, when you're within the sacred mountains, it's believed that you are protected, that you are safe, you are home, you are where you belong. And if you venture away from those mountains, there's ceremonies that you can do to protect yourself because you've gone beyond the boundaries. You've gone into a space that is not where you belong. And so you need to protect yourself before you go. For some, that involves ceremonies. For others, it can involve corn pollen. It can involve wearing turquoise when you go to a place where you feel like you don't belong, that somehow your protection can cover you. And so when I thought about these sacred mountains and thought about how I felt like I belonged in that space, I started to realize that it comes in the answer of fulfilling my purpose and walking in faithfulness to God's call. This is sacred belonging. And so today I want you to consider your sacred mountains. They don't have to be mountains at all. But where is your holy ground? Where is your faithfulness going to emerge in your life? Have you found it already? Are you close? Are you on the way up the mountain? Or are you still wondering where that might exist? And when you get to that place where you truly belong, how can you use your power to help others find their place of belonging? This is a Navajo hogan, and so is this. This is also a Navajo hogan. I'm hoping that both lights are. Yes. So this is the traditional home of the Navajo. And there's beauty in the design of this hogan. The hogan itself, we don't have any middle schoolers here. Middle schoolers can't really handle this, but I think you all can handle this. The hogan itself is the symbol of a pregnant woman's belly. And so this top roof of this hogan represents a pregnant woman's belly. So that means that this smokestack here, this pipe coming out of the middle, is the umbilical cord. And the umbilical cord connects you to God, the Creator, and also connects you to the earth, and all around it to your family. The beauty of this hogan then means that your home is your womb. So you're in your mother's womb at first, and then when you're born, you're brought into this home, this second womb, where you are to be nourished and fed and developed further so that you can go out into the world a complete and developed person. It's really a beautiful symbol. Even the logs themselves, which you can't see in my photo, but it often looks like this, like a log cabin. And those logs, oftentimes 9 of them, for the 9 months of pregnancy, symbolize that waiting time, that waiting to embrace that child into the home. And symbolize how, at each of the corners, your mother, your father, your grandparents on your mother's side, your grandparents on your mother's father's side, and your mother's mother's side, and all of those ancestors are ready to embrace and to protect you and to say, this is where you belong. This is your home. The Navajo were once nomadic people. We were hunters and gatherers and sometimes raiders of the Pueblo's beautiful farm products. But we wandered the Southwest. We lived off the land, searching for resources, searching for belonging. And so this landing of a home that is not a nomadic home is symbolic of the Navajo saying, this is our place. This is our sacred space of belonging. The next thing, of course, that happens after a home is built and then a child is welcomed, a child is born. In the Navajo tradition says that the baby comes from the gods, and that child is deciding whether or not to stay in that home. And so really, the baby has to be convinced to stay. And so I wanted to bring to you this cradle board today to show you the support that this baby receives. So normally, I don't have it all laced up, but normally the baby would be laced up here. Oh, I have a picture of my granddaughter. She's 6 now. She didn't fit in. But, so the baby is laced up in this cradle board. And in the beauty and the wealth of the Navajo culture, everything in the cradle board has symbolism. So the first thing you might notice is that even though it could be stronger if this were one piece of wood, it's actually 2 pieces of wood. And they're bound together in a covenant. They're bound together. The door of the hogan also has a male side and a female side, and the door frame across represents purity in that relationship. So this is the father and the mother who are supporting, who are the backbone of this child who has come into their home. And here at the foot, so that the baby doesn't slide off, we have another hogan. We have another hogan, showing that the foundation for this child will be firm and there will be a safe and protective home for this baby. So when the baby is in the cradle board, and perhaps it's leaning against the tree while the mother is weaving, and the dog runs by, or the spring winds blow in New Mexico, and it tips over, you've got this little roll bar here, right? To protect the baby's head, which is right here. I'm already skipping things in here. You can see the sacred mountains here also. But this arch here in the cradle board actually represents a rainbow. And as a Christian, I have to marvel at how God reveals truth through so many different cultures. In the Navajo creation story, there's a flood. The rainbow isn't directly connected to that flood, but there's a flood. And the flood comes because people had turned against one another, had started to fight against one another, and did the opposite of welcome and belonging and showing gratitude to the Creator. But you have this rainbow. And as a Christian, I know that this rainbow, God says, is placed in the sky as a promise of His covenant to us. That we're promised to be loved by God. We know that we're made in the image of God. No matter what part of the world we are, we have the Creator's image in us. And so this little baby is staring up. I think of my granddaughter staring up at this thing that's kind of maybe in her way as I grow, maybe in the eyesight and kind of don't understand why it's there. And that's how God's love is. God's love reaches to you before you can even understand what God's love is all about. It protects you before you even understand that you actually might need protection. And so I love that about the cradle board. So the family, as this baby's growing up, the family's goal is to convince this baby that she belongs in this family. And one of the signs that the baby has decided to stay is when someone in the family is able to get the baby to laugh out loud. And the Navajos celebrate this. And it is one of the most beautiful things in Navajo culture. The one who makes the baby laugh holds an honored space in that child's life for the rest of their lives. Even more than a godparent. It is really an honored role. And And it's so honored that that person gets to throw a massive party for the baby, with the baby. It's really the baby's party, but the person who made the baby laugh gets to throw the party with the baby. And it's called the laughing party or the laughing ceremony. And one of the things that happens, besides lots of good food and lots of fried bread and so forth at that party, is that the baby gives salt to each person on their plate as they go through the line, and gives other gifts as well. But they give salt. And I have some salt that hopefully a couple of students can help later. I'd like you to each take a piece of salt as you leave today. Why salt? Well, generations ago, salt was life. My people had to walk hundreds of miles to gather it. Salt preserved food through what we call at World Renew, the hunger season. The time when your crops are not going to be able to grow, when your food is starting to run out, and it doesn't look like there's going to be more. Salt was a game changer and a life changer and a life saver for the people who could then preserve food in order to last through that hunger season. So the baby's first reality is being in this cradle board, in that womb, in that safety and protection, knowing that they belong. Baby's first act is to give generously, sacrificially, something that is of such great life-saving value, giving that to others before the baby even understands what generosity is and what that means. Before knowing the joys of life, the Navajo are instilling in this child the spirit and the joy of generosity. In Navajo, the prayer for the baby is that that child will always have enough. And it's a very different definition than what Western society might teach. Having enough does not mean having enough for yourself. Having enough means you have enough to share and to give and to help others. That's your definition of enough. If you were only to have enough for yourself, you really don't have enough. Now we also know that salt is in our tears, right? Our salty tears. And so salt also can represent sorrow. And sharing that salt, sharing those tears, means that you're going to have a community that comes around you to help you during those times of deep, deep grief. That you will belong, and that you will have family, clan, community. Some people will have church, which will surround that child in times of great sorrow. This child belongs and will always belong. One of the other beautiful things that the Navajo do is to take the baby's umbilical cord after birth and bury it near the hoga. And this act is done with a prayer that that child will always return safely to that home. That no matter how far the child wanders, how great the distance becomes in relationship between the family and the child, no matter what choices they make that might pull them away from this place that they belong, that they know that they can always return, even if a prodigal returning. This is sacred belonging. And my sacred relatives, today I want to remind you that you are worthy of belonging. You are deserving of this kind of sacred space. In fact, you need a home base. You need your Hogan people. You need to know that there are people who will love you and connect with you always, who are often like you, sometimes uncomfortably so, but they get you. They are your people. And they are going to love you no matter what, no matter how you return to them, regardless of how far you've wandered, what you have done, what you have not done, you belong, and they will embrace you. You can be that prodigal who makes mistakes and still come back into the protective arms of your hogan. And if you have no space like that today, know that you have it with our Creator, who smiles on you and says, you are mine, and you are beloved, and you will have that. This is a truth that's not spoken about very much in today's news that I have to watch every day. In the realities that we see flashing before us, it seems like the world is trying to push people out rather than to pull them in. And sometimes you may feel like you wonder if you will ever find a space like a hogan, so safe that you could even call it a womb. But you need that space. And I hope that here at Hope that you're finding those kinds of spaces and that you're creating those kinds of communities of belonging, your wombs of nourishment and safety, and that you can stand and know that you belong. You belong here. This morning I faced east and I watched the dawn break through the darkness. I lit some sage and some sweetgrass as I prayed for today. I thought of the ancient cathedrals and the incense that has been burned over the centuries. And I breathed in deep, connecting even through my floor, picturing the ground that my home stands on. The incense rose up, the sage rose up, and it grounded my soul, kind of like that umbilical cord and the smoke rising and also going down. And I asked myself, how are we going to find this sense of belonging in this world today, beyond our homes, beyond the safety of the wombs, beyond comfort zones? How are we going to belong in a world that seems to turn on us, to want to throw us out, want to label an us and them? How are we going to find sacred ground strong enough to help us bounce back from that kind of rejection? And how are we going to embrace the diversity, act in inclusive ways, and find belonging together across all the differences that we have? Is this even possible? Was my prayer this morning. I happen to be reading, just started it this weekend, Brené Brown's new book called Strong Ground. And she writes about the force of the ground and how the ground actually, maybe there's some physics students out there, but how actually pushing on the ground, it pushes back. And it can multiply the strength that we exert. She happened to learn this in physical therapy. But it's also true for those of you who are athletes. You know the power of the ground and how it can help you push harder. She gives several examples about how this works on football teams. We all need grounding these days. In my work with World Renew, which I told you was a humanitarian and development agency, we work in more than 25 countries around the world at any given moment. I see unstable ground. I see the rise of conflicts, the shifting of climate patterns. I see and talk to persecuted Christians, and I see the threats to civil society. World Renew's mission is to serve Christ by walking with the most vulnerable, to ensure that there is enough food, good nutrition, and that life with choices and resources will help communities flourish together. I get to do all of that from a place of abundance, not scarcity. This place that indigenous people call Turtle Island, this place, North America, has always been a land of plenty. Indigenous people have gathered for centuries to give thanks to the Creator. In a few weeks, you might do the same If you're Canadian, you did that a couple weeks ago. But you'll take time to give thanks to the Lord, the Creator, for harvest and for bounty and for blessing. I'm privileged to be able to join my ancestors in that sense of gratitude throughout the generation. And yet today we seem to be getting messages that there is not enough. There's not enough for everybody. There's not enough to share. Generous people are mocked. People who think of giving up something in sacrifice for another are gaslit. And so we stand against that. And there's a message, too, that we don't all belong. We don't all belong here in Turtle Island. I wanted to think about a little bit about this belonging. This picture is a little hard to see, but it is a picture of the three sisters. And I think the three sisters is a model for belonging. It's not my model. The three sisters are corn, beans, and squash. And so that's what you're seeing a picture of. Robin Wall Kilmer, who wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass, describes so beautifully how corn, bean, and squash work together. How these plants work together, growing strong, and through that strength, help each other flourish at the same time. It's a harmonious triad. Each using her gifts, each sister using her gifts for the benefit of all. And each sister is unique and different. There's diversity in this relationship. They work and grow together. The corn sprouts up fast and quick and grows tall. And then that will later provide something for the bean, which sprouts next, to start to climb up. And then finally the squash grows, a latecomer to the party, but it creeps along and it's got these big, beautiful leaves, which both keep down the weeds, and we teach this all over in our agriculture projects in World Renew, that minimize those weeds, but also shades the earth from the hot sun and retains the moisture that all three plants need. Under the ground, even more happens, with the roots of the beans releasing nitrogen so that the corn can have its second burst of growth and produce that ear, produce that fruit that it's to grow. These three sisters are distinct and diverse, and yet they seem to know one another. They belong together and demonstrate the sacredness of being in a space for one another's benefit. This is our Creator's design, and I think it's a beautiful model for our belonging. We are part of this harmonious design. We are called into reciprocal and sacrificial love for our sisters and our siblings. More than neighbors, we are family. And yet, throughout history, we have pushed one another away. In the Western tradition, humans are often seen as the pinnacle of creation. In Native ways of knowing, humans are the younger siblings of creation. The younger siblings who have the most to learn. As Christians, we know we were created on the sixth day. We were placed after all the plants and animals and placed for belonging, for completion of God's creation, and called to sacredly steward and care for creation. Creation belongs to us, but we belong to the created world as well. And so we can look to creation as our teachers and for our guidance, and then bring glory to the Creator of all. I think this is a generosity and a joy that sacred belonging brings into our lives. There's also lament and grief for the ways that humans have encroached upon creation and one another. The history of Indian boarding schools, called residential schools in Canada, forced removals of tribal people from their lands, and broken treaties is hard. It's a hard part of our history. The three sisters teach us that there can be a different path, that we don't need to push one another out in order to thrive, that if we can grow and work together, each supporting the other's development, whether you realize it or not, you can grow and thrive and flourish together. Robin Wall Kimmerer talks of and imagines about this in Braiding Sweetgrass when she says she likes to imagine that the three sisters are deliberately working together. But the beauty of the partnership is that each plant does what it does to increase their own growth. The bean is doing what the bean needs to do to be a bean. But in the relationship, the bean is also releasing that nitrogen into the soil. The corn is doing what the corn needs to do to produce corn. But in that growing tall, it creates a place for the bean to grow up and for the bean to see the sunshine, because the squash is doing what the squash is supposed to do, being the squash, and it's spreading out. And if the bean didn't have a place to grow up, it could get shaded too much by those squash leaves and not be able to flourish. Isn't that beautiful that you're each designed to do exactly what you're supposed to do, but in living into that full potential, you're actually able to bless others around you. And wouldn't it be beautiful if you noticed that that's what your life is doing? That you're actually, through your flourishing, you're helping others flourish. She talks about the value of reciprocity and individuality, and how each sister has her unique gift, but it's only when she shares the gift that the other two flourish. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to share our gifts. This is not competitive ground. This is not a place of scarcity. This is a place of abundance and beauty. And if one part is pulled out of the equation, but certain people are pulled away from that relationship, it really is destruction, not just of one, but downfall of the whole system. The reciprocity of the relationship goes deep, and these plants seem to know each other, and that's when they flourish. It's a beautiful model of belonging. I want to encourage you today that you are one of these three sisters. You are called to belong. You are called to use your gifts to nourish others, release your potential so others can climb, so roots can be protected, and goodness can be spread like pollen, far beyond where you will ever travel yourself. You belong so that others can also belong, and the entire ecosystem flourishes. This is the power that you carry, the sacredness of your purpose. I sat on this bench recently. That's when I got the photo. And I looked at the sunset. And I thought, I need you to sit with me with some thoughts today. So we're going to have some time for pause and reflection here, which is a very important thing. Navajos say that God, the Creator God, gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them proportionally. So I've been using my mouth a lot. Now we need to listen. We need to listen to God. What do we do? How can we carry this power rightly? At World Renew, we talk about the right use of power. And we try to, as our Micah 6 verse 8 talks about, to walk humbly and to spend a lot of time listening to communities. We do not go into communities with answers. We go in with ears and questions, because the answers already exist in those communities. They just need some space to climb. They just need some space to spread out. They just need some water to nourish and to root and to release that nitrogen and that energy. What does it mean for you to be a part of this sacred responsibility of belonging? You have power. You have the power to include, to invite, and to make someone else realize that they belong. You have the responsibility to belong yourself. This is all sacred work. So, I want you to think about Finding your Hogan people. Where is your circle of safety? I told you that you are all worthy of that womb, of that safety and protection. Loneliness is an epidemic in the United States today, a silent epidemic. Who are the people who are your people, your Hogan people? I'd like you to imagine those good people, and I would like you to even just take out your notes. I use my phone notes, but write down 5 people who are your Hogan people. Take a moment to do that. I'm going to hold your Hogan. I'm going to pray for you while you consider who are your Hogan people. Who will always love you, who you know you belong. I hope you had 5. Maybe you have more. I probably should have chosen 4 because that's a Navajo sacred number. But I want you to have more than sacredness, more. Now imagine that you're the bean and you need to climb. You're ready to climb. Who are going to be the people who are mentors for you? Who are those corn stalks who have sprouted up before you and who are strong and ready to be your mentors? Try to think of 2 people. Maybe they already are a mentor for you, or maybe you'd like the courage to ask them to be your mentor. Write down 2 people who might be corn people for you. And now consider that you're the bean, and perhaps you're growing great, you're climbing up, you're releasing your nitrogen into the soil. Who are the squash around you who could benefit from that release, from that beauty, from you using your gifts in just the way that God would want you to use them? Who might that be? And have you noticed those people around you? They come later into the picture. They come later. So you might be very busy as a bean, growing up, and forget to look down and just notice that the squash is shaping your roots, keeping those weeds out of your life, but they're very different than you. Who might be those squash people that you could then notice and include? In ancient rock art in the Southwest, archaeologists try to find meaning in petroglyphs. This is a very common symbol in the Southwest. And many people believe that this is kind of like an alpha and omega symbol, that this must mean, with no beginning and no end, this spiral must represent the deities, must represent the gods somehow. And I love this imagery of spiraling in, deeper and deeper in, trying to get to that sacred space. But also, you can spiral back out and go out. Once you touch those sacred spaces, you can spiral back out and go back out into the world. And that's one of the reasons I love prayer labyrinths. A prayer labyrinth is a tool that you can use to pray. You enter in, and you're eventually going to end up in the center, in that sacred space in the center. But first, as you travel, it's not just a spiral, and you get there. You walk in, and then there's a turn. And you're like, oh, I'm not going the direction I thought. I've got to turn. I've got to notice something different. And then you go through the prayer labyrinth further, and you turn again. and then you turn again. And at some point, if the prayer labyrinth is big enough, you start to wonder if you're actually going to make it to the center. It feels a bit more like a maze, but you can't get lost in a prayer labyrinth. It will always bring you to that sacred space of belonging and to that center space. The Navajo basket is similar to a prayer labyrinth. I brought one here. This Navajo basket has this sacred space in the middle as well. And on the outside are the red rock mesas that we find in the Southwest. One of my mentors, Elmer Yazzie, sorry, am I doing that? One of my Navajo mentors, Elmer Yazzie, I'm going to show you a painting of his in a minute, talks about how we climb up these mesas, get through sort of these mountains down to these valleys, and that each one of these represents a maturing that we do on our Christian walk. The power that you carry to help get to those sacred spaces of belonging will not matter if you carry it for yourself. And my prayer is that you will find a way to carry that power rightly, that you will share it for the good of others, and that you will come in to that space of belonging. I get to work all around the world. Oops. And I wanted to introduce you to Mary. Mary had a struggle with belonging. She did not believe that she was worthy. And in her unworthiness, she became an alcoholic. And the moonshine that was made in her village in Tanzania took over her life, to the extent that she neglected her 4 children. She told me when I met her that she had one time gotten a kilo of meat, finally, had cooked it up in front of her 4 hungry children and proceeded to eat all of it herself. She said she was so disconnected from being a mother and for caring about anything else than her next high that she did that right in front of her children. But on the day that I met her, Mary had been sober for a number of years because she had been shared with a partner of World Renew, the African Inland Church of Tanzania, had shared with Mary her real sense of belonging and her sense of worth, and she found her space. And she had become a chicken farmer, and she raised all kinds of chickens, and the beauty of the day that I met her is that Mary said, you know, I used to get so drunk, people would have to drag me home. And as she stood in front of this church that she was helping to build, which was really big for her village size, and she wanted everybody to fit into it, she said, I used to get so drunk, all these guys in the front row, I used to be an angry drunk, I would beat them up. And they all sat there and they just nodded their heads. They had all been beat up by Mary at one point or another. And she said, I turned my life around, and God turned my life around. And now I feed people instead of taking away that food. It's just such a powerful story of transformation. Mary is still turning and using her gifts and releasing that nitrogen into the soil as she trains other people and other women on various farming techniques in Tanzania. And one of those hungry children is about to graduate from university, something that she didn't even know that she was a possibility in the remote village life that she was living in Tanzania. These 4 young people I met in India. I met them on October 15, which was 1 week after, in 2023, which was 1 week after the horrendous attacks that happened in Israel. And now we can see how that all unfolded. But I was in India at the time, listening to the stories of these 4 young people. The 2 on the left are from the Santhal tribe, and the 2 on the right are from the Malto tribe. And their tribe, both Christians, had generations of violence against each other. The Santhal tribe had come into the area later on and had pushed the Malto tribe up out of the valley into the mountains, where the Malto tribe could barely survive. There was no flat ground to grow rice. It was very difficult to raise cattle. It was drier up there, the conditions were harder. And so actually, you can even see the Salto people flourished and grew tall, and the Malto people remained stunted and short. And because of that stunting, World Renew, with the help of the USAID grant, came into that area in India and started to work farming and nutrition programs to help change the stunting. World Renew quickly realized that it was not going to be enough to offer farming techniques and to help increase food security in that area, because these tribes hated each other. These tribes focused on retaliation for any infraction. If your cow wandered down to if your Malto cow wandered down into the Salto Valley and ate in the rice paddy, not only was the cow killed, but the person who owned the cow, their house could be burned down. If your daughter wandered, or son wandered up into the mountains and chopped down some of the Malto trees, which was one of the very few resources they had, they would come down and kill the people who did it, or express violence against the women. It was a horrible, horrible cycle of violence. And we knew that we had to do something in order to break that cycle. And so World Renew started to work as we do in our peace building work, and getting these two tribes to talk to each other instead of to fight each other. And so the day that I came and met these tribes, I had my feet washed, as is the tradition for both of the tribes. And one person came through, the Santo person came through and washed my feet. And then the Malto woman came through and dried and oiled my feet. It was a beautiful, beautiful expression of community. They also gathered that same day to worship together. I don't know if I'm doing that or not. But they gathered to worship together. And it was beautiful to see these two tribes decide that they were going to live in peace. And what the young people who I met did, the young people that I met, I'm going to turn off I'll stay by the thing. Is that better? Okay. The young people had arranged a massive soccer tournament that covered the whole weekend. I couldn't capture I could show you all the motorcycles parked there. I couldn't capture how many people were at this huge, huge soccer tournament. That these four young people said, you know what? If we're going to learn how to live together, then we need to learn how to play with one another and have fun together and have different ways that we can build relationship so that we can all belong. And I got to come and kick the soccer ball out for the first girls' game, the first time they had girls' teams. And the only way that you can tell, besides still some stunting and some height differences, the only way you can tell a little bit of which tribe is which is that the Malto girls really did not want to wear shoes, even though they were all given soccer cleats. Some of them are there in their bare feet because they just felt that they could control the ball and run faster without the cleats. But it was a beautiful, beautiful coming together of two tribes who used to kill each other and now have found ways to talk through their differences and to say, you know what? God has given us this space and this land together. Let's figure out how we can belong together instead of to fight and to push one another out. It's a beautiful, beautiful work. I've cried as I've left these places because I haven't always felt like my own people here in the United States have been able to come to those places of transformation. I've seen beautiful things happening in indigenous communities in this country, but there's still a long way to go. And so I want to leave you with one last image here, and that is this picture of from my friend Elmer Yazzie, called The Spirit of Availability. I have the original behind me here, but I'm going to stick by the mic and just talk about this. He painted this painting a little while after he and his wife were in a terrible car accident. They were hit by a drunk driver in Gallup, New Mexico, and his wife, there was a moment when they weren't sure that she was going to survive that accident. And there were moments when they thought she might be paralyzed because of the accident. Elmer is an artist. He's a runner. He's one of our beloved cross-country coaches. He was a great runner and coach and artist. And he thought to himself, what if it were I that couldn't move? What purpose would I have? If I didn't have my arms and my legs, what good would I be to the world? And so he had to struggle with that thought. And so he painted this, and he made the person in this painting particularly without any arms or without any legs. It's meant to just look like a body. This person has the spirit of life in them, and if you were to tip the picture, you would see that rainbow. This is a covenant child. If you look in the head of the person, you will see that spiral of the deity, except for Elmer is a Christian, and so he turned it into a triangle spiral to represent the triune God. This is someone who wants their mind to be transformed through Christ. And they're on an altar. They are on an altar of 12 stones, offering themselves up, like it says in Romans, as a living sacrifice. It's called the spirit of availability because it is actually when you go to seek your sacred ground, it's actually not about your abilities. It's about your availability to God's faithfulness. And that's what I want to leave with you today, my sacred siblings, that you are called into sacred mountains, which may not be physical spaces, though they can be that. But you are called into a spiritual space to truly see one another, to experience what it's like, to make yourself available, not relying just on your abilities, but on your availability to God's call. Offering up your whole self on the altar to live and belong. And this is my prayer for you, and it's God's promise to you, that you can walk in this power, that you can be generous, just like that gift of salt, that you can be salt on the earth in the spirit of generosity that lives into joy, that you can embrace the tears that come from deep grief, because that truly shows that you loved deeply and that you belonged significantly. There's no greater strength than knowing that you belong, and there's no greater power that you carry than letting others know that they also belong. So I want to thank you, Ahehe, for joining me in this sacred space today, and may you carry your power with intention, generosity, and love, creating sacred belonging wherever you go. Ahehe. Thank you. All right, this is for thank you for those of you who sat on the floor for a long time.
Hello? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniela Andres Hernandez Alvarez, or just Daniel Hernandez Alvarez. I represent the Culture and Inclusion Committee, representative for the Pan-Indigenous Student. And first off, I wanted to thank you all for showing up, for filling up this room, and for, just being here. That really means a lot to us. Thank you all for celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day and our lovely guest speaker, Okay, so we're going to start the Q&A portion of the lecture. Right up here we have a QR code for where you can submit any questions, and they'll go right here. If you're more of a pen and paper person, just raise your hand, and we'll provide notepads and pens so that you can write down your questions and you can get them
get it going more smoothly. All right. Just to start things off, I would want to start with some of the questions of our own. Can you feel belonging when you don't feel protected or safe? Like, can you walk with purpose while you don't feel safe?
That's a great question. You know, I think just like a seed, God puts that seed of belonging in each one of us. And if you can tap into that sense of God's image in you, that even in very unsafe, unprotected spaces, you still can sense that even if you don't feel like you belong, you know that that's a basic need that you have. But it is challenging. World Renew works in trauma healing all over the world. And it's a necessary, a necessary thing to have safety and to have that protection. And so oftentimes we're going into spaces where disaster and crisis has happened. We recognize that we need to first address the trauma, because you can't expect people to rise up and head into fields or pay attention to, diversity in their diet and nutrition and other things that will cause a healthy life if the trauma is there. And especially in places where we work with displaced people and refugees around the world, even when you flee one unsafe situation, you can get to a refugee settlement where there's not safety either, and it's terrifying again. And so that's one of the primary things that we feel like we have to work on, is that protection and that safety, especially for women and girls.
Yeah, no, I feel maybe a lot of people have been feeling more unsafe in these coming days, and like sort of more of these uncertain times, I would say, because recently there have been like many changes, like the government shutting down, funding being cut, budgets and stuff, and I think something maybe people would want to know is just like, how do you deal with that sort of uncertainty?
Yeah. It's hard to deal with uncertainty and anxiety, and I think it's important to, and that's why I talk about your Hogan people. You've got to have those spaces where you can show up fully and be your true self, and have those people in your life. And so I think I'm blessed with many different Hogans, as the Navajos tend to all kind of cluster. You've got to have a bunch of those different circles where you can truly show up as your true self. And you have to make decisions, even as we are called to extend that belonging to others. You have to make decisions about where you're at personally, in order to be able to do that. And certainly World Renew as a humanitarian organization and the changes that have happened over this past year, both in funding and access to funding, but also in shift of people's perspectives about the value of our work. It's been a hard go. It's been a hard go for my staff. And we've had to regroup often back into those places of safety. And so I would encourage you, balance your life. That's what Navajo hozho is about. Balance your life between going deep in and then knowing when you're ready to go back out again.
So with these kind of, you work with the United Nations, right?
We are a member of the United Nations, ECOSAC, yes.
Yeah.
So I attend and speak there at times, yes.
Yeah, so seeing kind of like problems on a more global scale, how would you kind of consider trying to create places of belonging in the event of like abuses of power?
You know, it's got to happen at the community level. We are big believers at World Renew in civil society and in Christians' responsibility to be a part, an active part of that civil society. And so even in the most remote communities, we work in working with, let's say, women to get land rights, to advocate that just because their husband passes away, they shouldn't lose their home and their farm and their livelihood and displace their entire family. We work with people groups who are fighting against, even seeming small things, like in Uganda, we worked with a community who was selling alcohol to children on their way to school in these little baggies, and everybody knew that it shouldn't happen and that it was illegal, but no one dared to stand up against it. So talking with the community and saying, what is your big dream? And the big dream was that their children wouldn't show up drunk at school and they wouldn't get addicted to alcohol. Working with communities to empower them to be those change agents is truly inspiring. And I think that just as I've shed tears for changes I wish I could see amongst my own people, I think we need to pay attention as people here in the United States to how other people groups mobilize and advocate and speak out for their rights, because we have a lot to learn. There's good lessons to be learned for everyone there.
So you mentioned kind of more of like environmental and like ecosystems of like flourishing and kind of that idea of like the three sisters. Do you think you could expand more on that?
Well, we can expand, actually literally about the agriculture projects that we do at World Renew, because we teach intercropping and we teach crop rotation, and there's been incredible success with helping people actually sometimes 6, 7, 8 times, they can increase their productivity on their land without having to increase the amount of land at all. And that changes people's entire lives, because suddenly they have enough and more than enough to get through that hunger season. And so that transforms their lives, and it trickles down into families being able to send their children to school, families being able to, this one farmer, Benjamin in Tanzania, told me that he had leisure time for the first time in his life. And I said, oh, what do you do with your leisure time? He said, well, now I can go and I'm training to be an evangelist at my church. And I thought, oh, that's not what I do with my leisure time. But that was his great desire and joy, was to be able to give back. So there's that, and that's an amazing thing. But I do sometimes, on the more figurative level, I've thought about, these three sisters, and I talk about how maybe we're the bean or the corn or the squash. But sometimes I think that we're a fourth sister, and we are called to be caretakers of that whole ecosystem. And that's a great call. And it's easy to live in our comfort. We need to call ourselves into that uncomfortable space at times, and to really recognize what is our call to care for creation. How is what I'm doing in my life here in West Michigan, here in New Mexico, impacting women that I met in Bangladesh who are living on renting land right where these rivers come together, which struck me because that's one of my clans. They, in the last 7 years, they've experienced 17 floods. And they had a little mound in each courtyard of their house, maybe about this high, where they would actually live on that mound during that time. And when I saw that's all happening because of the sea levels rising, and then everything comes in, the salt water intrudes into the rice paddies, and everything is lost time and time again. And I think, what choices have I been making back in my life in Michigan that's somehow contributing to these women having to live this life? And I wept. I went to a Christian climate center in Bangladesh, where you walked through this hallway and they had these photos of these people who have been displaced because of the rising sea levels and the storms in Bangladesh. And they had this sound of this storm and this wind that was pounding. And I couldn't make it through the whole hallway. I actually fell to my knees and I just wept thinking, what have I done, Lord, to impact my brothers and sisters in this part of the region? And what am I going to do to help alleviate some of the suffering that they have? So when we think of the three sisters in that small little microsystem, ecosystem, we have to realize we're all part of some bigger one that we need to take a good hard look at.